A powerlifting competition is the ultimate test of strength, but you only have 3 attempts per lift to show what you're capable of. So, how do you choose attempts on the day to ensure that you do just that? In today's video, we'll give you the ins and outs of attempt selection. We'll be referencing the meat card that we used in our last video, so if you don't have a copy of that yet, check down in the description box below so that you can follow along. When it comes to our attempt selection, I like to start by coming up with a good goal for your 3rd attempt. Here's what that looks like. Obviously, your 3rd attempt is gonna be 100%. Your 2nd attempt is gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of 95, 96%, and your opening attempt is gonna be somewhere around 90 to 92%. So this is a great start for an approximate plan, but keep in mind that everything can change, and in some cases, should change. My biggest piece of advice when it comes to attempt selection is do not be married to the numbers. How aggressive or conservative you are with attempts will have a lot to do with your goals for the day. Whether you're trying to qualify for a further competition, whether you're trying to compete head-to-head directly against another opponent, or whether you're there to just hit some PRs and have fun. If it's your first competition and you're just feeling out what powerlifting is like as a sport, then you're probably gonna wanna be a bit more conservative with your attempt selection. If you have a head-to-head direct competitor or you're looking for a qualifying total, then you have a decent reason to push harder and be slightly more aggressive with your attempts. Speaking of records, here's Rhea Stin with an unofficial world record bench press of 229 kilos. Now, wouldn't you want to get your bench press equipment from somebody who knew what the heck they were talking about? If you're like me and would prefer to source things from someone who lives and breathes the sport, make sure to check out our video sponsors at innerstrengthproducts.ca. The company's owned by Rhea and her husband Ryan Stin, and they're based here in Canada. They have an incredible selection of products, and they'll take care of all of your powerlifting needs. With that out of the way, let's go through our attempts in a sort of play-by-play. First, you're gonna head up into the tunnel or staging area when you're maybe 2 to 3 lifters out. You're gonna wait for the call that the bar is loaded, then you'll head out onto the platform. When the head ref yells bar is loaded, you have 1 minute to get the start command in the case of the squat or bench, and in the case of the deadlift, you have that same 1 minute to start lifting the bar. Quick tip if you're handling or coaching, make sure as your lifter goes out to double check the screen as well as the weight on the bar and the rack height. Make sure these things are correct, and if there's any mistakes there, you can notify the head referee to have it corrected. Next, you'll proceed to the platform and perform the lift as per the commands we discussed in video number 3. As you walk off the platform, lights will come up indicating whether your lift was successful or whether it wasn't. Each of these lights that comes up after your lift represents one of the 3 referees. A white light means they approve your lift and it is successful if you have a majority of white lights, 2 or 3. And a red light means that that referee does not believe you fulfilled the requirements of a successful lift. A failed lift is 2 or 3 red lights. Once these lights come up, you have 1 minute to submit your next attempt to the scoring table. If you fail to submit your next attempt in time, one of 2 things will happen. Number 1, if you made your lift, then failed to submit, you're gonna get an increase of 2.5 kilos for your next attempt. Number 2, if you failed your lift, then failed to submit, you'll repeat that weight on your next attempt. You should have a pretty good idea of the jump you wanna make from 1st to 2nd attempt because you have this handy dandy meat card that you filled out ahead of time. So now all that's left is making the call. That call being whether you take the jump to your planned 2nd attempt or you shoot a bit lower. For anyone familiar with RPE, I would say an opening attempt at an RPE 7 to 7.5 indicates let's take the full jump. For anyone maybe less familiar or unfamiliar completely with RPE, a 7 to 7.5 would be indicated by a really smooth lift and the absence of any distinguishable sticking point. Now let's reference our 2 potential strategies, both a strategy that's a little bit more aggressive and risky, and a strategy that's a little bit more conservative and playing it safe. In our aggressive scenario, you are looking for a qualifying total or going head-to-head with a competitor. In this case, it's almost always better to take the planned jump or very close to, which is often about 6% of the bar load. If your second attempt is a little bit too hard, you can always take a smaller jump to your third, but it's very hard to take a small jump to second, realize, I'm stronger than I thought I was, and then take a really big jump, Hail Mary, swing for the fences on your third. In the conservative scenario, if this is your first competition and maybe you're feeling a bit nervous or anxious about the bar weights on the day, firstly, this is where having a handler or a coach or somebody who knows your lifting and ideally knows the sport of powerlifting a little bit comes in very handy. If you're on your own and the sheet's calling for a 6% jump that you just don't think is there, feel free to lower that to a 3 to 5% jump. A good tip when it comes to planning your attempts out and taking that jump from first to second is I would almost always rather see a bigger jump from first to second than from second to third attempt. Let's say that you're trying to make a 20 kilo spread between your opening attempt and your final attempt. You might look at that and think, let's go from opener 10 kilos up to second, and then we go 10 kilos from second to third. Because of the fact it gets harder to predict your strength once we get heavier and closer to the limit, I would almost always rather take the bigger jump first and instead go 12.5 to second attempt and 7.5 to third attempt. Now, once you've done your second attempt, we should have a pretty good idea of what's left in the tank. For those familiar with RPE, our second attempt should be somewhere in the 8 to 9 RPE range. For those unfamiliar with RPE, we're looking for the presence of a sticking point, but definitely not a maximal lift. Calling the perfect third attempt is tough. It's an art and a science. It's impacted greatly by ton of different factors, things like your mental state, the presence of a whole bunch of hype or absence of hype, your ability to focus and concentrate, your level of experience, etc., etc., etc. We'll get more in depth on some of these sports psychology topics in a later video. But suffice to say that choosing the perfect third attempt is really what powerlifting boils down to. Squeezing that very last kilo out of yourself is kind of what this is all about. So if you get it wrong, don't beat yourself up. Everyone gets it wrong sometimes, and it takes a hell of a lot of experience to increase that hit rate. Now let's give some specific advice on choosing third attempts based on those scenarios we discussed earlier. First, the aggressive scenarios. Number one, if you're looking to break a record and it's your third attempt, load the record. That one's pretty straightforward. Second, if you're looking to make a qualifying total or maybe a total record, you have to weigh the probability of being able to hit this weight versus how much you might have to make up on other lifts if you miss it. Is it better to try to eke out an extra 2.5 on your squat to leave room for your bench and deadlift in case they fall short? Or is it better to go 2.5 lighter on the squat because you can probably make it up on the deadlift later? Now, there are also a few things that may change for third attempt selection based on which lift we're doing. Firstly, the bench press. Unless you're somebody who benches 200 kilos or more, chances are you don't want to be making jumps that are bigger than, say, 5 to 7.5 kilos. Taking jumps of 10 kilos or more on the bench press can be really hard to execute. Often, looking at the bench press score sheet after a round of third attempts can be a sea of red based on the technicality of execution, the calls, and the commands. Now, when it comes to third deadlift attempt selection, we could probably make an entire video about that, and we might. But suffice to say for now, you can change your third deadlift 2 times. When making these changes, you can't go below the weight that's already loaded on the bar, and you have until the head referee says bar is loaded to make the change to your attempt. Sometimes managing and handling these changes in the heat of competition can trip a lot of people up, so let's walk through a relatively simple scenario. All right, so in this scenario, there's you and your competitor, Jerry. You're coming down to third deadlifts. You've put 310 kilos in for your third attempt. Jerry is attempting 297.5 kilos for his third attempt. If he makes 297, you have to pull 310 to win. However, if he misses 297, well, you could only pull 302.5 and still win. So what you do is you preemptively fill out your deadlift attempt change. You put in change, deadlift, 302.5. Then you watch Jerry. You see if he makes the lift or not. If he makes the lift, you don't submit your change. If Jerry misses that deadlift, you're standing next to the score table, ready to put that in. He gets red lights, boom, it gets handed in. You take the minimum you need to beat him. However, if you're not paying attention and you're not ready, Jerry goes and misses, and then somebody else pulls 305 kilos, well, you can no longer drop to 302.5 kilos, despite that being the minimum you need to win. You'll have to pull at least 305 kilos because that's what's already loaded on the bar. Now, this is a pretty simple and straightforward example where A, you're the better deadlifter, so you get to go later and just sort of watch and see what happens, make your change relatively smooth. This scenario also assumes that you only have one person you're competing with. You're not vying for a second place finish while also trying to fend off bronze from jumping over you. However, I think this example illustrates a very simple and straightforward case of how to make changes to your third deadlift. The next concept I want to cover in this video, even though it's not directly tied to attempt selection, is going to be communication and conduct with your referees, spotters and loaders, and with the scoring table. Firstly, many novice lifters are unsure as to why they got a call. If you have a coach or handler and they can tell you, that's going to be the easiest way to know. If you're unsure, you can either approach the jury, which is going to be a group of people seated at a table watching the meet in the same attire as the referees, or you can approach the head referee and politely ask what you got the red lights or yellow or blue for. You are also within your right to protest the call by, again, approaching the jury. If you're trying to protest a call, then the way to approach it is something like, "Excuse me, I believe that myself or my lifter hit depth on that. Would the jury or referees be willing to reconsider that call?" Now, it is very uncommon at the lower level for head referees or the jury to overturn calls, but if you feel you have a good handle on the rule or infraction, it's sometimes worth a shot. Just don't be that person who is approaching the head referee or jury on every single call. Not only is that going to hold up the meet, but you do that a few times and chances are you're getting waved away before you even make it to the table by the end of it. If you're approaching the bar and something is incorrectly set, whether it be the weight on the bar or the height of the rack, you can address the platform generally, ensuring the head referee is made aware. In the case of a misload, you'll leave the platform and the spotting loading crew will adjust it. If this happens, ensure that you get a restart on your 1-minute attempt timer. If, however, the rack height is wrong for you, but it is accurate to the height that you submitted when you weighed in, then you can still request the adjustment, but you do not get the timer restart. And that giant pile of information is a primer on the actual lifting process of powerlifting competition. You might have to watch it through a few times to soak it all up, but as far as competing at your first powerlifting meet, this is a pretty comprehensive guide on all those things that you might need to know. If you're enjoying this content so far, then you should check out the Calgary Barbell Training app. We put as much love and attention into that app as we put into these videos. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and sticking through to the end of the video. If you liked this, make sure to like and subscribe and follow along for video 8 of the Path of Powerlifting series. Coming up next, we're going to go in depth on advanced meet day strategy, dipping into a little bit of sports psychology, as well as some of the more nuanced aspects of game day. We'll see you there.